Wait, yeah,
Mute yours so it doesn't. And I'm going to go walk around for a minute.
Alright, hang on. So where's the new one?
Oh, you're right.
Oh, that's the new one?
Right outside the elevator,
That's where you were.
right that yeah, if you right that off on your road, that's where you
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, really, if she just puts things in the CPMI space here, I can do it later, or if she wants to put it back in the vortex, that would be fine. Or if she wants to take it, I can get it.
Yeah.
Really, I just
Sorry.
and I'll actually.
I mean, let's see, hang on.
Cooler. If you want to put it in, I told Deanna, she can, you guys can sort it out. I'm sure it'll be fine. Right. And I hope you have a really good meetup. And I'm gonna go.
Okay, Sam, one more time.
Alright. I'm emptying the cache. So there's no way that it should be the old one. Fascinating. Okay.
You still have the old one.
Yeah. Yeah, and like the pages are like generating like buku JavaScript error messages.
All right, give me just a second again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take you to the YouTube page, which you won't have the Q&A, but let's just see if that will work. I'm not stopping this broadcast.
Alright, so can you refresh this again?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go to YouTube and let's just see what comes up.
They're still giving it to the Google Plus event. It's supposed to just be the YouTube thing? Okay. So this is the live one. Live right now on the Q&A site. I'm still not getting it. Oh, it's set for tomorrow? Oh, jeez. Okay, I'm seeing something now.
It takes a while, so a couple of seconds.
Yep, there's my name.
Yep. now that's with me.
So I don't really have to do anything except make sure it doesn't go into it. Make sure the screen doesn't pop.
And look for Q&A.
Yeah. I mean, perfect is perfect. Unless I know when you can be
Gio. I am Sam.
Sam, Mickey,
Hello there.
Indiana.
Hello there.
What are you doing today?
Hmm?
Are you giving a presentation?
No. I just yeah, I came here super early. I work at T-Rex, and I took the train here, so like, you know, I didn't have to fight traffic or anything. I just kind of walked.
So you rented a little bit of space there?
Hmm?
Do you get an office there, or do you just
So the company I work for, so I'm an employee, I'm not an entrepreneur. The company I work for is renting out 2 office spaces on the
I've seen it. Incredible concept.
Yeah.
What's
T-Rex.
it like? What's the environment like? Is there a lot of sharing, or you rent an office, or just a little space practically that they provide phone?
Yeah. Compared to other places, T-Rex is kind of quiet. A lot of people just kind of like hang out in their own offices and do their own thing. So I don't like. There are times when they'll have like happy hours and like Friday afternoons or whatever, and people socialize then. But it's fairly quiet. It's not like a bustling place. Yeah, I like it. I like being there. Just so happens that the offices that I'm in has like a really nice view of the river and the whichever bridge that is, the triangular one. I can't remember what it's called. There's a bridge that I look at. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to know.
What's the occupancy?
What's the occupancy?
Yeah, me. Like 8% club, or
I mean, they're fairly booked. So the T-Rex organization actually owns the entire building. And just this year, they're adding office spaces to the 4th floor, which is like below their main lobby area. So they're adding people all the time. Yeah, it's pretty good. My main complaint is that sometimes their Wi-Fi is not that great, but you can add on a wired connection to your office for very little. But yeah, people would just go in there to just work. It's a pretty good deal.
I'm sure there's people working in bizarre hours.
Yeah. If you pay for the full membership, you have 24/7 access to the building, and so you get like a building code, and they have like security guards there all the time, so you can just pop in whenever you like. I have yet to actually do that. So the company I work for, the very general category we're in is DevOps. We're trying to build up like an opinionated framework so people can hit the ground running with like a cloud-based infrastructure, like very quickly. So let's say that you're a startup and you want to build some kind of like a data processing system, right? Like if you started from scratch and wanted to build up a robust system that was able to be fault tolerant and all that stuff, it would, like, my boss Steve, he's estimated that it takes about a year for a full team of engineers to build out a system that's proof. What we're trying to do is we're trying to put in that work, build up like a really kind of generic framework that you can just throw in your own config into it, and you have something like that's up and running in 20 to 40 minutes. We're trying to get it down faster. We're trying to make it even simpler than it is currently. So yeah, and so our cluster. So the main project we're working on is called Mantle, and a Mantle cluster allows you to install other apps on top of it, like Kafka, Spark, the Elk stack, those kinds of things. So. No.
They described the technology that included Docker, a lot of open source. They were talking about building.
Was the presenter named Steve?
I don't remember his name. It wasn't here.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, Leslie's husband, Steve. Yeah, that's the company.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think during the presentation they kept on referring to you as a partner. I remember somebody sitting on the far left.
I doubt that was me, because I haven't been working for the company for a year. That might have been Brian. Brian Hicks. He has facial hair like that. Yeah, he's been with the company longer. He's deceived. So yeah, that's probably Brian. Yeah, it's really interesting. All of our software that we work on is open source and public. So we don't have internal projects. Well, we have one, but we're going to release it soon. It will not stay.
What's the database like?
We support different ones. So we don't. None of the users that we have, I don't think any of them have used Hadoop, but I believe that we can support that. Fairly certain we can. I know we can support Cassandra. Cassandra. It's like a NoSQL database used for a couple of different things. I mean, Logstash. That's a data storage. So it's. I mean, like, I don't know if it's up to date, but I mean, we have an example app of deploying a Minecraft server running on it. So it's like, as long as you are able to define like a Docker image or a Marathon framework, you can have it run on top of it. Like, the main thing that Mantle does is that we have chosen a bunch of different open source tools that allow for coordination. So, for example, are you familiar with Console? It's a HashiCorp tool, and it's a distributed key value store like etcd. it does DNS, and so those two things are the service discovery and a bunch of other stuff. So like we use that to coordinate the clusters to make sure that all the different all the virtual machines know where all their IP addresses are. We have a choice of either Kubernetes or Mesos or Marathon to schedule it. Yeah, it's a thing where like our list of components that we support is like 20 items long. So it's a lot. It took me about a month for me to like figure out just all the different components.
There's a lot of, how did you get up to speed with all that? How they play, how they play, there's a lot of issues. How well they play.
So things fail quickly. Fortunately, when I came on, the project was pretty well along writing all the D code. So like, we use a combination of Terraform and Ansible to provision the class currently. So like, Terraform is another HashiConf tool. You give it a configuration file, it creates virtual machines. So like, have you ever deployed to like a DigitalOcean or AWS or anything like that? Okay. So normally what you have to do is you have to go in manually and click a bunch of buttons to set stuff. Kind of like
It's really fast. Great AWS, it's pretty fast.
to
Go ahead and provision server.
Oh yeah, so Terraform can spin up an AWS cluster in like 5 minutes or so, and that's like VPN, load balancers, DNS, 8+ nodes.
That's outrageous.
Yeah, it's Terraform's a good tool, and then we use Ansible to install the software on each of the nodes. So like, you set an odd number of control nodes, and then you add on as many worker nodes as you want, and then you add like an edge node or two for load balancing. And so then we use Ansible to kind of like, all right, you control nodes, you get all this stuff. Workers, you get this stuff. Edge nodes, you get this stuff. We use Traffic for load balancing, which is a Go program that only was like, I think they reached the 1.0 like maybe a month ago or something like that. They recently stable version. Like this traffic tool is basically just becoming a new hotness type project, and Steve was like, I like that, let's use it. So it became like an official tool.
Are there any specific tools that are particular to the leader for certain areas, like traffic?
No.
So everyone has their own bag.
Yeah, Docker's trying to do their own stack. Google Kubernetes is trying to make their own stack. AWS is trying to has like made multiple stacks that are all like hedge maze and like how are you supposed to use it? DigitalOcean's trying to do all sorts of stuff. CoreOS, CoreOS, which is a Linux distribution specifically made for Docker, like they figured out that, oh well, we should make our own container environment. So they created their own project called Rocket, which hit 1.0 this year. We were experimenting with like switching to. It was like, oh, Rocket's got these features. Oh well, it doesn't work with it, so we just dropped it as like an experiment. Yeah.
Do you think it's time certain staff will become a mature platform and will be the choice? Do you think there'll be this many players?
I think it's. I mean, I think what's going to happen is, like, I mean, Steve thinks about this stuff constantly, but like,
What if you know, just for an example, think of all the Flash developers out there. They bet that was going to be the platform for mobile, for everything.
yeah,
You think
yeah. I don't think I mean, I like each company that's like that's doing this, that's in this space. A lot of them are just taking DC money, paying it over this, and so it's not in their best business interests to interoperate with other things. Like they don't want, like, so like Docker doesn't want to become the commodity technology for CoreOS. So they're like, screw you, CoreOS, we're going to do our own thing over here. And then CoreOS is like, well, you know, we don't want to become a commodity for this stack over here, so we're going to make our own stack. Same thing with Google. Like everybody is like, there's a business incentive to not be a commodity, to have your own silo.
sure. Nice speaking with you, Sam.
Yeah, the only sure things that I would say to bet on the DevOps scene, all the new tools are being written in Go. So that's going to become like the language of these DevOps. It's like that's a pretty solid market trend. I mean, other than that, it changes really fast. So that's about the only thing I know, is that Go is the lead language. Thank you.
Yeah, what I remember that's right
Yeah. Almost showtime. Yeah, we kind of wanted to ask you, like, how's it going? But, like, I don't know if you want to tell your personal story to the
Oh, yeah.
broadcast.
We'll definitely catch up afterwards.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Good call. Here's my life story. Welcome everyone to the kickoff. I'm in academia, so I'm always on an academic calendar. So kickoff to the new academic year for this meetup. I really appreciate everyone coming here. It's this is, let's see, a group that we formed in, we're going to try the microphone. All right. In 2012 with 11 people, and we are just shy of 1,000 members for this meetup, so it's very exciting. If this is your first time, would you mind raising your hand? Okay, so those of you who've been here before know, look around and make sure that you at least say hi. So we consider ourselves a group where introverts come to socialize, so no one is required to say more than hi, and then you can go on. We don't try to pressure anyone into anything. Do you want to switch the slides then, or can we stand here for a second? Okay. So we've started. We are broadcasting live, which is why we're trying to figure out so that I stay on camera. We do have a group over in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois that gets together, so a shout out to Beth and her group. And I know that we have other people on the line as well. We actually had one talk where the speaker was contacted by Apple 2 days later and went out to give a talk to Apple. So it's interesting who's online, but we really appreciate the panelists tonight being willing to be broadcast live as well. So let's go ahead and get started. And I'm going to go off the video for just a moment. So I just want to shout out to our leadership. So I'm Leslie McIntosh. I am the organizer. This was founded with Stephen Borelli, who's back in the back now. And then these other wonderful people. If you are on the leadership team, would you mind just raising your hand? Let's give them all a round of applause. This is volunteer work. So it is everybody taking their time and coming to a few leadership meetings and also then working to get these going. So really appreciate it. We also have sponsors. So O'Reilly sponsored this one. If you have not checked out the post on the meetup, they have one free ticket to their artificial intelligence conference that is coming up very soon. If you are interested in going, please go and register for that. We'll post the link again. We'll broadcast the link to make sure that you see that. The drawing will be, I believe, at the last week in August. So thanks to them. We also want to thank Asteris, who provided us with the nice food and drinks tonight. We always appreciate that. If you know of any other corporation who would be interested in sponsoring this, we're always looking for other people to help pay for food and drinks, so we can keep membership free. A couple of announcements. We do have one meetup scheduled in October. We are working on the schedule for the academic year, so bear with us, but those will be coming out very soon. That is on October 18th. So tonight's talk is the first in a panel series, What is Data Science? That from a business perspective. The next one will be from data scientist perspective, and then we will have a third one that comes from the educational and training perspective. So those are the three. That last one will be either January or February. We're trying to work that out. We also have Dan London, who has volunteered to be one of the speakers either for September or November, which is why I couldn't put the date up there. We're still working out with him, but he will be talking about machine learning and how he's applied it in the educational field. So I think he should be a pretty exciting person to hear. And then I already mentioned the O'Reilly Artificial Intelligence. So I want to thank all of the panelists. They are going to introduce themselves, but if you did not see it on the meetup, here's their information, and they're gonna make introductions in a minute. So we're gonna keep moving. So let's get started. I found this quote today, and I got very excited, okay? Because I always wanted to plan a heist, okay? And I realized that that's what I'm doing in my day-to-day job with forming a data team, and I don't go to jail for it. So, you know, there's some pros to that. So the reason that we're even having this panel is because I started getting these questions, comments. People would reach out to me and say, hey, do you know somebody who needs a job in data science? And then I would get the job description, and I'm like, how many people do you want for all of these things that you're asking? And it was very clear that data science meant a lot to that person. And I'd have people reach out to me and say, do I have enough stats in me to be a data scientist? And then I looked at educational programs and boot camps, and I'm going, there's a disconnect between what the jobs that are out there posted, not all of them that are posted, the people that consider themselves data scientists, and then the educational and training programs. So I thought this would be a good series to have as part of our meetup, and by the number of people that have shown up, I think it's a good and salient topic to have. So what is data science, and what are we trying to do? Here's one view of it. And what we're trying to do really tonight is to figure out, what is it, and what is it from a business perspective? Is it really all of this? Is it some of it? We're not this is what we want to define, and we're also trying to help define it for this region so we understand in the St. Louis and broader region what this is. So I really appreciate the panelists coming to help us move forward on this quest. And I think with that, I'm going to turn that off. Do we want to turn the lights on more up here, or are they okay?
They're okay.
They're okay. All right. That's good. Okay, so we are gonna.
Let's start that second.
We're starting at this side. Okay, this is an easy one. I just want you guys to introduce yourselves. Okay, talk about your company, your role, how many people report to you, describe your team, that type of thing. Okay? And it seems like you have to talk right into the mic. Just test it out.
Hello.
Yep. Okay.
So my name is Vamsi Nkolu. I'm good at PS. I don't know anything about data science. I'm not a data scientist, but I'm a partner in a company, and we do a lot of this analysis work in the retail industry, more in terms of like out of stock predictions and category management, and when it comes to sales, what is the store that needs to be visited, and predicting things like that and stuff like that. So that's what it is.
Describe your team. You're all in business, so describe how many people do you report to you, or just talk about your team.
So I have about 50 people reporting to me, but they are between St. Louis, Pittsburgh, and India, and the company is about 250 people.
250. All right.
So, and what do? We cover the entire spectrum of data, right from collection to the final analysis. I was talking to somebody, and the question is, yes, we talk about not all data is ready for analytics. So we align the data that comes from multiple systems. I mean, even if you look at point of sale systems, when you go buy things, there's a lot of planning that happens in when you go to a store and buy it, and the same product from a different store can be coming from a different system. So it's so different, and all of that. So again, from a collection standpoint, has to be made ready before you can do anything. And then once, of course, so that's what I mean by the left side of the spectrum, and on the right side of the spectrum is the whole digital strategy, which is about how do you engage your customer, how do you make sure that the right product is. I mean, in terms of inventorying the product all the way in the supply chain, more from a sales and marketing side now. That's very important to recognize. It's more from a sales and marketing and business value. That's very important because for all the manufacturers and distributors, they need to understand and they need to see value in all of this, right? So that's where we come into picture.
Nice. Thank you.
Thanks. My name is Jeremy Farmer. I actually work for the Federal Reserve. My career actually started doing more in the data architecture DBA side, and I was with a kind of a software company and doing a similar work that was being discussed earlier with looking at our customers, looking at kind of the products, the pricing trends of our different products, and kind of made a move through manufacturing for about 7 years, and then landed at the Federal Reserve, where, as most people can imagine, at the Federal Reserve, we're looking at various financial transactions. We're looking at different economic trends. We're using a variety of data sources to look at a variety of things, whether it's forecasting out specific trends, whether it's looking at anomalies in those financial transactions or payments that might be processed. My team is roughly specific to the analytics part of my responsibilities is about 25 to 30 people and growing. We have a range of entry-level analysts to PhD data scientists, and we'll talk about what data scientists are a little bit later, or at least my definition of what a data scientist is. But so we have a pretty diverse group of people, anywhere from, if you look at the spectrum behind us, the DBA, data architect type people, all the way to those doing the statistical modeling and similar type of activities.
I'm Laura Tellman, and I'm a director of clinical informatics at Washington University School of Medicine at BJC. What I'm doing there is mostly around data integration, data governance, and decision support. So I'm assuming you guys know a lot about data integration and data governance, but for the purposes of decision support, I'll give you a simple example, which is today, within seconds of any order being placed for a drug for a patient at BJC, I have a set of algorithms that are screening whether or not that's the right drug for you, whether you have drug-drug interactions that may affect why you should be on that drug, whether because of your clinical condition the dose was right, as well as things like, is that really the drug that should be used for the disease that you have? And then we have things like that across the spectrum of care that you would get at BJC. Okay, so my team, 2 years ago, my role changed pretty significantly. So I'm going to talk about before and after. So before 2 years ago, I was really leading that data integration, decision support team. It was about 12 to 20 people, depending on the day and the number of consultants we were using. And they were pretty much separated into 3 core groups, which was a group doing all the data integration, a group doing what we now call data broker services, so people just using that data to answer people's questions, and then the group doing the decision support development. 2 years ago, I switched to doing just data governance, so now I'm trying to make sense of the data for both BJC and WashU, and that team is 8 people, and then I still have that data broker service reporting to me, which is around 4 or 5 people.
I thought you would say 2 years ago you started doing your MBA too, and then.
That was you.
That's supposed to be the next question.
Oh, the next question. Leslie wasn't sure she was going to let me talk, but I've got this, so I'll say a few things. I'm Bill Shannon. I retired 2 months ago from the faculty at WashU School of Medicine. I'm a biostatistician, and I jumped ship to focus my time on my company, BioRankings. We have 6 people there full-time and are about to get a 7th PhD statistician joining us, which is pretty exciting. We need to grow. We're past the startup phase, more on the scale-up phase. Our service is different in that we work with biotech startups, big pharma companies, to take data that they have that no one knows what to do with, and we act like we do. And they hire us for that. And we develop statistical methods for unique data sets. Microbiome is one of them, functional magnetic resonance imaging, brain imaging data. We're funded by 2 sources, contracts with companies and SBIR grants from the National Institutes of Health. So we have about a 50-50 split on the funding. The staff consists of statisticians and programmers. My partner is a business person, so she actually makes sure we get paid and things like that happen. Anything else?
I think that's good.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to see if the second mic works. Testing.
Yeah. Testing.
Okay, so could you pass the microphone to Laura to hold?
She's scared I'm going to speak when it's not my turn, which I probably know.
He doesn't need a mic.
He just proved his existence. Okay, so the next thing I just want to talk about, because we are talking from a business perspective, and I really worked hard to try to, out of 4 panelists, I really wanted to get together 4 different perspectives. If you have already seen some work for the government, some work for themselves, some work for larger companies, some are smaller. So I tried to get that, different perspectives. And then I started looking, and you all have MBAs. And so I do want you to talk about what you've done to educate yourself and train yourself to be in this position. And then I also just address the fact that at some point you all got MBAs as well. And let's just head that one on. And we can start back with Bill if you'd like.
Get it over with, huh? Do I need this for the people not here?
It helps
Okay.
with the,
Because I can.
yeah, I know. Yes.
So I've spent 25 years in academia, and it's a wonderful field. I left WashU not hating the job. I love it. It was the greatest job I've ever had until today. I knew nothing about business. I had a vice president in my office. I'm practically on my knees begging for consulting. And at the end of the hour, he looks at me and says, "You never told me what your value proposition was." And I said, "What the hell is that?" No idea. So I started learning business, and I realized that if I wanted to leave the university and have a second career with a startup company, I needed to jumpstart my business education. And to show how unprepared I was the first day of class, the professor's lecturing, and I said, "Excuse me, what do you mean capital?" And he looked at me and said, "That's money, Bill." So this is how little of an idea about business I had. So the MBA was essential for me to get from out of the university to a scale-up company. So it's very valuable.
And to note, you have a PhD, which you worked with at the university, so that was the level as a faculty member,
Right.
correct?
Okay, so computer science trained. I got my undergrad and then went to work in government and defense at Emerson Electric, doing missile guidance systems and other various things like that. And decided that I do that forever, for sure. And went back and got my master's in computer science and then joined Washington University. I got the data bite, the bug, actually taking an elective course the last year of my undergrad work. So it was just, I needed to fill some space, took this elective course. It was on, database theories and technology, and I fell in love with data. And let's see, then, and so that's like the extent of my formal training, other than, some other little stuff like project management, blah, 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 right? I went to get my MBA because, I'm very, very similar to Bill in that I, can talk data all day and night, but then when they're talking about things like, what's your value proposition, what is this, what is that, I was like, deer in the headlights, right? So I knew that in order to grow in the position that I was in, I needed to be able to speak the business. And so that's why I went and got my MBA, and it was also very valuable for me. I actually learned that the thing that business is not as boring as I thought it was.
Well, I actually have a similar story. I'm a computer scientist trained undergraduate. Came into my first job, got thrown directly under the CFO, trying to do strategic analysis for him, and got lost pretty quick when it came to the business jargon. And so I immediately jumped into the MBA because I was lost. I had the technical skills, I had the mathematical skills, but I didn't quite understand the jargon. I was learning the business, which was extremely helpful. So I went directly to get my MBA just to kind of get that knowledge. And I think it helped me. It definitely helped me as I transitioned through my career, having that base knowledge. But that pretty much is the path I had as well.
So a one-line answer for me is that I was always inquisitive about data, and then I had great mentor all along. I worked for only 2 companies all my career, which is the company, same guy basically I'm working for now. He's my big mentor. And then I worked for Monsanto for 5 years. But even at Monsanto, I had great people to work with. So that was basically it. But if I get into the details, I did my master's in mathematics from a top school in India, top 10 schools in India. And then my job started there, and it was in the product in the data area, built one of the industry's first master data management solutions. Then he brought me to Pittsburgh, and then one thing led to another. And again, like I said, great mentor where they gave me an opportunity to make mistakes, and the only requirement was I need to clean it up, whatever I do. and then fast forward, it came to a point where I thought I could not figure out how things worked. When I looked at currencies, or the biggest thing I've learned out of MBA is about incentive system. If you are talking to, at the end of the day, my boss always gets upset if I cannot present it right. If the color is bad, he's very upset. So what MBA taught me is the incentive system. What is in it worth when you're talking to somebody? What is in it for them? So That's basically my biggest thing.
So I think that leads us right into the next question, which is data science can be characterized by the tools, by the methods, and the skills that you use. But how would you define data science?
This is my definition. It's the art of connecting the dots to tell a good story. And it's usually by a team of people, and it's not one person. That's my definition of data science.
Yeah, I think it's an evolution of many of the different disciplines coming together. I tend to agree that there is not a single sole person who's this super data scientist. It's a cool title, but when you look at the scope of responsibility, when you talk about the statistical modeling, you talk about bringing different data sources for the data munging exercises, you think about how you have to design algorithms and queries on a massively parallel processing database to get optimal, performance. Generally, finding a single person who has all those capabilities is rather challenging. So what we tend to look at for a term of data science, because that is a catchy term and that's what we use to bring people in, and there's some marketing to that, but it is the people who do have the willingness to study the business, but yet they understand how to write code. They do understand some basic, statistics and math, and we'll get into some of those things as well later. But it's having some of that base knowledge across many of those disciplines and can somehow harmonize all that together and really uncover those stories or uncover those, signals in the noise to really drive insights for the business to act upon.
Yeah, so I don't know that I'm going to say anything new, but I think it's the discipline of marrying statistics, computational power, and people who understand data to drive business value.
So my PhD is in biostatistics, but I really think I have a PhD in data. Data has properties. You talk to a scientist, a chemist, they talk about the properties of chemicals. You talk to an astrophysicist, they talk about the properties of stars in the sky. There are very specific properties that scientists study, and I believe data has properties. And it's not a matter of using a tool. It's not a matter of knowing an algorithm or knowing a theorem. It's a matter of how do you learn what those properties are for your problem and figure out the best way to study that. That's my view of data science. Do I have to do that?
I think he wants to follow up, so.
I will.
I want to take the microphone.
Okay, great. Can I go?
So I just wanted to give a little bit of example and context to it. So I think it will be easier for all of us to connect a little bit. So the way we do it, when we run some of these analytics, we see three. I said it's a team of people, right? So the critical person in this is the stakeholder who has the domain knowledge. It was, I think, in one of your slide, the way you linked it up in one of the slides. So basically, the domain knowledge is very important because he's the. It's not like you're trying to find an. Otherwise, it's like you're finding a needle in a hay or something like that, right? So there has to be a domain expert who needs to have a hunch on where the opportunity is, and he's basically drives. And the way we do it in our business is this is the person who also has those relationships. It's not just being able to tell a story, but you have to be able to market the story, and you need some credibility there. So having the right people there is important. And then the next part of it is the statistical or the analysis piece of it, which is the whole analyst piece of it. And the third piece is, of course, the tools and technology, where somebody has to actually run the models. So I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. I think that helps clarify. So just to be fair, why don't we start with Jeremy? We'll start in the middle. No, hang on to it. We'll start in the middle. Laura, you'll get to be the first one on the next one. So that actually leads us right into just, can you give us an example, maybe a project? Just walk us through some of the daily activities. I think you've led into this perfectly, that you've completed or your group has completed, just to give people an idea of what it's like to complete a project, work on a data science project.
Yeah, I think there's various phases in this process. I mean, looking back in my current place and previously, I mean, there's a lot of work that needs to go up front and setting up the business problem. There's this argument of exploratory analytics where you don't know what you're going for. You're just going to look at the properties. You're going to see what you can find. There's other cases where you actually have business stakeholders you're partnering with to try to figure out how can I bring the insights out to answer a specific business problem. So setting up that business problem, we have specific people who help craft what that is, work and grab some of those requirements, but also we convert that to an analytic problem. And really that's the step of really trying to help map it to the data. What data do we have? What kind of techniques would we might want to use on this? It really is taking that step. And then it gets into this data preparation phase that we go through. It really is getting into the data, cleansing the data, pulling the data together, maybe creating new fields from existing fields, understanding what the rules are, trends are. It's really kind of making sure we've identified everything we need. And generally, this is when you start getting some of the more technical savvy folks into the mix, doing some of the work. And then generally, once you have done some of that data identification, data cleansing, that's when you typically can hand that off to some maybe more of our advanced modelers who are actually taking some of that data and applying some more of the advanced algorithms. They're trying to look for certain trends. They're trying different types of, we do a lot of different types of data matching. So whether it's very direct like-to-like fields or using statistical calculations to see similarity between fields, for example, that's where some of our more advanced staff come in and try to apply some of those techniques, who then try to produce outputs. And then we use various tools for visualizations, which we'll talk about as well. But it's then how do you make that data relevant and how do you make it digestible by a variety of audiences? And so we have a lot of time that we spend building more detailed, you would almost think research type papers for some of the more technically active people who want to look at that. But then you have this executive summary that's developed that we try to help highlight those key findings. So really that's generally our process as we go through that. And it really involves a variety of different people within our process, but generally they're all together through the entire phase. So the business learning's there. So some of the understanding of the technical side is gained by our business side so they can be better at informing our business what we're capable of doing for them. But that's more of the general flow of the type of work that we do and how we approach it.
Great. I'm just going to talk about an example of a project that I was involved in. So it was an early warning system project. So essentially what it was setting out to do is to try to identify patients in the hospital who were declining before anyone might notice that they were declining, so that we could take action and prevent, for instance, them staying longer than they needed to, or, failing. So first we had to get a large volume of historical data about patients and run it through algorithms to try to identify what were the variables that would predict a person who would decline. And then once we had that, and that, that's not as easy as it sounds, right? And then once we had that algorithm, we said, okay, great. Now we think we know what would predict somebody to fail. Now let's take our data that's coming to us in real time and use that algorithm to then identify who might be failing. And we just tested that algorithm for a while to see if it was choosing people that we thought were the right candidates. Then once we had that streamlined, we said, okay, now we're going to put this in place and we're going to have this data go to a clinician. So now you've got a clinician on the floor being told that a patient, that we think a patient is declining, right? And that was actually the most interesting part of the project, because they would get the data and they would go, oh, we don't know what to do. Put them in the ICU. and so then we realized, oh, that business thing is coming back to get me, right? We have to think about, okay, now we have to teach them, what do you do when you're being told in advance that somebody might be declining, as opposed to, what their reaction was, which was, let's just put them in the ICU. So that's just an example of one of our projects. Many of them follow that path, but then others take different paths, but I think that's fairly descriptive.
So I'm going to discuss two, one very quick. I think the issue of the expert is essential. People will call me up or email me nowadays. and say, do you have data you can share? Because we have an algorithm we think will work on it. And I say, you don't need data, you need the expert who can tell you what the data means, because otherwise you're just going to be playing. 2 projects. One of them, a client called us last week, said we got a letter from the FDA. We need to do these analyses that they demand, plus these additional analyses. So the project very quickly turned into a routine statistical console. Another project that's much longer is brain imaging data. A year ago, a neuroscientist I work with who collects data that we're analyzing said, we want a regression problem. We want to know how the brain changes with age. Seems like an interesting question. Huge amounts of data. This has been an ongoing year-long project that we finally practiced about 2 weeks ago and are now preparing to show, and hopefully we'll get feedback to refine that. So I think there's some projects that are, we can have this to you in a week to go back to the FDA, and other projects are, we have to initiate an entirely new research agenda to try to develop that. And they use a lot of the approaches that you guys were talking about.
So I hope you hear the consistent theme there. So in our case, we basically are aligned with the customer to figure out what their problems, what are they trying to optimize. I mean, I think in all the examples you will see that, right? Where is the opportunity? And then that's the starting point. And the example I'd like to take is, I mean, in the retail industry, you can, we were looking at data from, the problem we wanted to solve was out of stocks, to predict an out of stock, because you market, and if you think from an angle of manufacturer, you are promoting the product, you're coming up with a new product, you are planning the entire supply chain to make sure that the right product is there, the right quantity at the store. Now, to predict out of stock, because they do all this work and you go to buy the product and it's not there, it's a big problem. So that's one of the problems that we tackled, and along with other predictions such as when should the sales guy for the manufacturer or the distributor go to the store at what time. That's some kind of prediction. More importantly, predicting is one side of the story. The second side of the story is how accurate is your prediction. So the number of data sets that go in all of this is a lot, and that's where, again, all the stakeholders, you have to be really aligned with your distributors, stores, manufacturers, everybody, so that they are all bought into the story.
Thank you. So I want to move now, and you all touched on this a little bit. For those of you who may be interested in going into data science, what does it take? You've all talked about having different team members, but I want to get to the point that people have been asking, do I have enough statistics to come and do this? Do I need to be a programmer? And a couple of you have programming background. What is the mindset that you need to move into? I think those two go together, both the training needs, educational needs, and then what mindset. If we can move into that. And Laura, I think you're the person. Do you want to start?
Sure.
Okay.
I think it's really hard question, and I can tell you how we recruit today. So the way we recruit today is looking at people with either a computer science, a mathematics, an information management background. I did hire a biologist once who happened to be one of the best guys I ever had. So there are other things out there. And we have toyed with both having people who have programming and don't have programming. And I have found that the people who do not have the programming background don't tend to be as successful as the people who do. Now, you don't have to be a Java programmer, right? I mean, if you know SQL really, really well, you can do a lot. I'm sorry. Tell me one more time what I'm supposed to be
It really, for the people who want to enter into this field.
Right. I know I was on the right track. Yeah, so my suggestion would be that, get one of the core disciplines. So get a math, get a computer science, get a and a statistical and or an information science, background. And then be curious. Because that's the other thing that you really need, is to be curious and to want to figure out things that are pretty complex sometimes. And then get into an environment that will let you use these skills a lot. That one person I mentioned who was a biologist, we hired him as an intern, and he spent 4 months doing nothing but rewriting queries. And what that did was he learned more about our data in those 4 months than anybody else on my staff. And he still is one of our star people because we just sort of let him just get completely, embedded in what is the data and how do I want to use it. So I don't know, that's what I would offer.
So we're still answering the question.
If you want, if you don't have
Okay, I
anything
don't
to
want to go
add.
halfway through the question and then ask what it was. We've known we've known each other 20 years, I can do that. So data science covers a lot of things. You put a brain into a scanner, it generates 30 gigabytes of data. That data comes out of the machine, gets dropped onto a computer somewhere, I've never seen it. And you have physicists, you have mathematicians, you have computer scientists, you have neuroscientists working on that. And that's the bioinformatics. That is all data science. At a certain point, the data is processed. We won't go through that. That's not an area I work in. But it gets to the point where we now want to say, are these brains in Parkinson's and non-Parkinson's different? Schizophrenics and non-schizophrenics. That becomes a statistical problem as far as I'm concerned. Another area of data science. So I think there's a wide range of data science fields. I'm concerned when people try to cross over. So I do a lot in genetics as well. I don't know what genes are, other than at a very high level. I don't want to know how molecular pathways work. I've got a basic idea. But when the geneticist or the neuroscientist is talking, I listen to them. When the computer scientist for optimizing programs talking, I'm listening to them. And hopefully when the statistician's talking, people are listening to the statistician. And I'm just going to plug my field a little bit. There's a lot of people that say, I actually had someone said, I read a statistics book, and I think the way you're doing bootstrapping is all wrong. Would you like to write that paper with me? And I said, no, because you don't know statistics. You have to, because he was wrong, but he had read one book and then thought he knew statistics. Be very careful to take your skills and think you know other people's skills, because those people are trained. I have 15 graduate level classes in statistics. I don't know what these folks do. They don't know what I do, but by working together, we can solve the problem. So data science, broad range.
So I believe one has to be high in agility and problem solving. That's very important. And after that, I like we have been discussing. It's not.
It's you. I'm sorry.
Actually, it might be.
Oh, yeah, I did. Yeah. Here.
You'll get that back at the end of class.
I just bought it. So yeah, you have to be high on agility and problem solving. That is a must. But where you fit is the next important thing. Like, I'll speak for myself. My attention span is very small. I can, but what I'm good at is taking a lot of things and combining. So if you are good in the business, in the domain knowledge, that's where you focus on. But there are other people who are willing to put the mind to it, maybe there's a statistician who goes into the details and does the 1 year of work, and he's giving you all this input. So if I may, with all due respect, it's more like you're scalable. you can have, if you have ideas, right? You have 1 of 10 different things that are possible. You don't know. You could be probably wrong in all 10 items. I have a joke actually. When who discovered tungsten? Edison, right?
Discovered what?
Tungsten bulb. So when somebody asked him,
That was the pop quiz. of the year.
so somebody asked him in a talk where, hey, you are doing research and you're spending so much time, and your paper every time is that, you can, this doesn't work. Don't you feel you're wasting time? And this was before he discovered tungsten to make the bulb. And then he just said, well, I've discovered whatever, 100 or 1,000,000 ways in which you cannot make it bulb. So the point being, in data science, you are coming up with this hypothesis. And if you are the business expert, you can't take one thing and run away. You need a scalable model. You need people, multiple people. And if you are the business expert, that's your job in data science. Now, you could be, if you like technology, you could be the tools person. If you like statistics, obviously you could be the statistics person. But like it was discussed earlier, the data and domain knowledge is very important. It's not driven by pure technology, because you can come up with all kinds of weird. Actually, I want to give another example. This is a hypothetical example. I'm trying to mask what we found and all that stuff. But let's say you find that drug usage has gone up, and somebody wants to do an analysis, and you figure out that it's linked to gas prices. Gas prices have come down, so people have more disposable income, and hence the people are using that money on drugs. Now, if you make that link, and you want to make a prescription and say, to increase gas prices to bring down the drug consumption, that doesn't make sense, right? So you got to be careful what kind of, that's where the business knowledge, all these things are important. Otherwise, you could, I don't know what you think and what kind of delivery. Story is important, right? You need to come up with a good story.
Yeah, no, I'll be quick. I think what I'm gonna hit on, the people I've seen most successful in any of the places I've worked are those who, we look for people with technical degrees. We have physicists, we have computer scientists, we have mathematicians, ranging from actuarial scientists to, again, PhD level physicists. It's those science disciplines, and generally, because you do get a lot of the mathematical framework that you need, you get the programming framework, whether it be the C++, the Java, the R, you get exposure to SAS or Stata or Julia or whatever the languages of choice at the various schools. But I think I'm going to side with the successful people who come in, beyond those base kind of skills, are the ones who want to jump in and study the data, the ones who want to learn it, because that's where you really learn the business. One of my first managers ever told me, he goes, when you sit on the data, you're the most knowledgeable person in the company. And if you can make sense of that, you can drive decisions. So in my current organization, that's who I've seen now, the various PhDs and the various computer science technical programmers, mathematicians, whatever. They, the ones that pop to the top are ones who don't mind struggling with the data. They don't mind understanding the lineage of the data. They don't mind talking to the various business holders and the stakeholders to understand what the business is around this data that's being collected and why. That's the driver for success in our organization. And so we look for people who have that tenacity to want to sit there and struggle with it and learn it, and not just want to be coding all day long, because that's not in our world how a data scientist is. It's not just sitting down a computer. It is understanding that entire spectrum across the board.
I want to follow up on that real quickly. So one of the things I teach my staff and people I'm mentoring is when you're doing data science, you have to look at the data. So this is going to take that even further. I will have people scroll by megabytes of data on the screen, and you'll be amazed at how often you'll see something pop up. That's a mistake. So looking at the data, I say, oh, you're going to add 3 to this column of numbers, add the 3, and then look to make sure you did it right. So it's following up. Hugely important.
So to summarize what you guys have said, you're looking for sort of the Sherlock Holmes of data, without the sociopathic tendencies, is that correct?
No, I'm okay with this.
Okay. Well, I almost got it.
I'm still thinking about the drugs and the gas prices.
Well, actually, I think what this made me think of was, so what comes up a lot is correlation versus causality. That people start, what you were talking about is they find these correlations, but it doesn't mean one caused the other. And it seems like with big data, people think the more data you have, the more this correlation is proven. And yes, but I just veered a little.
So I was on another panel like this, and there was a big data person who said, we weren't getting the right answer, so we gave it more data. And I said, okay, but when you have data, you're trying to estimate something. You are trying to get to a piece of truth. If you have data that's putting you over here, more data is going to put you over here more precisely. It doesn't get you to where you want. So this causality and correlation, you will find a result in big data every time you do it. And someone gives me data and says, can you find something to predict who dies? Yes, I can. Guaranteed. Won't work for the next data set. So you have to make sure that the data you have is able to answer that question and not that one.
Okay, well, this actually ties to our next question, if you'll, because that is really describing a situation where your client or customer would either want more from the data than possible, or didn't agree with what the data were saying. So perhaps, will that?
I want to argue a sociopath.
Okay. Oh, okay.
What
We'll get the psychologist in here. So I think we're back to you to start.
On this one, what do you do when someone wants a different result? If you're a tenured professor at WashU, you say, screw you. If you're a junior person, you have to be careful, but you have to be serious. I had a colleague say, I understand you've been arguing for a month that this is the right way to do the analysis, but it doesn't show what we want. And if we do it the wrong way, it gives us our result. So let's publish that first. And if the reviewers will put the right method in. And I said, I'm off the paper. I won't have anything to do with you anymore. And that stopped him. So you are always going to have people who are going to want something else. You have to, depending on your level, be careful about that. As a data scientist, you're responsible for the analysis, not the results. Okay? You can only do your job, and if the data is bad, there's nothing an analysis can do to make it better.
Oh, yep.
Well, the example I was going to give is another healthcare example. So one of the problems that we have is that we want to be able to attribute outcomes to the providers providing care, right? But since there's very few times now that you have only one provider caring for you, particularly if you are if you have more than one issue going on with you, so that physician attribution is one of the huge things that's being discussed in healthcare, right? How do I decide which physician do I attribute a certain outcome or failure of a certain outcome to? So that's an example of a problem that is really yet unsolved in my area.
Yeah, I guess one of the good examples I have is from a previous organization that's in manufacturing, where we were sent out to study inventory management. We were having a problem with the expiry of our products, and they couldn't understand why, because we have automated systems that tell us where to put away our product. So it wouldn't make any sense that the system would be directing us to hide expiring product in the back and cause, inaccuracies and inefficiencies from pull and puts, in the warehouse. So it was amazing when he started studying the patterns of not the actual pallets, but the behaviors of the forklift drivers. And this little unknown feature was known but forgotten, and they didn't think they used it to override where the system's telling them to put something. So as we started getting into the analysis, we started to understand personas of these individual forklift drivers and those people who decided that they wanted to override certain things at certain times of day because it may have revolved around their lunch schedule before they left, how many pallets are building up on the line. They were trying to take decision-making into their own hands. So we've tried presenting this analysis to our executive panel, and they said, no, that's not how it works in the factories. We've all been factory managers, that's not how it works. Like, well, here's the data we pulled, and they're like, well, let's get it across all factories. We said, well, we pulled it from 12 factories. We have the different personas, so we can tell you exactly what's happening. So what we ended up doing was putting it over time and basically watching it over time and continue to bring it back to them to inform them. Because I agree, we were there to make, to bring insights in and inform our leadership so they can make decisions. We weren't going to make decisions. We weren't going to change processes at the factories, but we were going to inform them on how they can improve that. So it was honestly just this, providing them the information, getting it through the right channels, showing them the value of time between how long is it taking you to put a product up in a warehouse, take it down, put it back up, to then move it over here. And when you started translating that to hourly rate, to slowdowns on the lines, to $1 million for 1 hour, $1 million of lost downtime, it starts to talk. So then that's where the business side comes in. That's when you start translating it to their business. But it wasn't an easy sell because you have a lot of people who, I'll say, have that gut instinct because they've been in the business for 30 years and they know how things work. That was probably one of our more challenging but yet rewarding experiences once the models were taken for truth.
So in my example, what we took the same prediction to 2 different customers. One of them, they loved it, they implemented it. The second one, they didn't because it didn't fall in their, like I go back to the incentive thing. Every organization usually has the top 10 things to follow for that year, and it was not a big problem for them. At least it didn't fall in the top 10 things for the company, so they didn't care for it. That's
So
all.
that was it?
That's
All right.
it. I mean, hopefully in the future, but it just depends on, it gets back to, I mean, for me, like I said, I always engage from business value standpoint, because at the end of the day, somebody has to pay for it.
Very nice. So that takes a lot of finesse, it seems, as well, from what you guys have said. So kind of tying into that, then we're in St. Louis. We're in the middle of the Midwest. How do you find data scientists to hire in this region to fulfill these, who can also do the finessing of what you just talked about and avoid, learning some of the business acumen as well? I don't know who we're on, but we're going to start with you.
So we have offices in St. Louis, Pittsburgh, and India, and the people, the business people who help us, who have the domain knowledge, they are not necessarily at these locations. They could be in New Jersey, they could be in Phoenix, they could be anywhere, because what we count on are those brains, because they could be retired people, they could be, maybe they work for our client and they're retired, and we bring them on. Or maybe they were in the distribution business, so they really know how the costing model works in the distribution business and all that stuff. So these are the people who generate the ideas. Then, of course, comes to statistics, where, again, we find it very difficult. I mean, the first one is very difficult. The second one is obviously getting the people who know the data and the statistics is also difficult. We struggle quite a bit. And then people who know the tools, it's new. Tools are changing all the time. So we train and we try to train, and we struggle quite a bit.
Okay, but what I heard you say is you also hire people off, are allowed to work remotely?
Yes, we have to, because these, like I said earlier, in terms of scalability, first we need the problem definition, the idea, somebody that really knows it. I mean, at the end of the day, if you are in the retail industry, if you look from one end, which is really the retail industry, guys, manufacturers are the people who have the money. Otherwise, you have very less margin in all the way in the supply chain. So manufacturers have to find it. So how do you incentivize manufacturers, distributors, the retailers, consumers? You have to connect all the dots, and somebody who really knows this is valuable.
Got it.
It's difficult.
So Jeremy, the feds, they let remote people work at home?
So I'll start first with my previous company. Geographic location wasn't a problem. We had people all over the world because it's a global organization. At the Federal Reserve, obviously, we have very strict, information practices, information security. We have very sensitive data that, can move markets if put in the wrong hands and comes out in the wrong ways. We have very sensitive information about, U.S. citizens. So we have to be very careful. So I will say the Federal Reserve is making a lot of strides moving forward and trying to adapt to this new workplace that looks at remote work arrangements, for example. And the Federal Reserve is making advances into that because of using analytics to do network detection, using analytics that's parsing every query that's going against a database to see is somebody querying a single social security ID who doesn't normally do that, or why would they be doing that, and the type of analysis that we do. So there's a lot of different advances being made that's allowing organizations like my own to feel comfortable that information practices are still being applied and centrally guarded. But with that being said, it's a rare thing right now. So we try to we have taken the approach of trying to find 1 or 2, 3 very solid senior level statisticians or data scientists where we've sourced the United States, and we understand that comes at a cost. We understand bringing them to St. Louis comes at a cost, and we try to balance that. But we also try to find those who are willing to work with what I would call more junior data scientists. So we are a firm believer that we go out and we try to find, really high aptitude type people coming out of school, coming out of their PhD program, a year or 2 experience, and it doesn't have to be a PhD, who we can grow. We feel that have some of these things that are being talked about, they have the potential to grow into those type of people. We still a statistician from the Genome Center here at WashU to be one of our principal data scientists. So we have to be creative. And yeah, we're very cost conscious. We're good advocates with taxpayers' money. So we don't have we're not Google. We're not these big companies that can pay an arm and a leg for these true data scientists that have everything. So we get creative, and we look to try to build the talent as much as possible. So we just got to find the right leaders and the right senior people who have those kind of skills that can coach and teach our less experienced people.
Great. So I'm going to talk about 3 different things. First of all, we've formed relationships with a lot of the programs here in St. Louis that do the undergrad degrees and the master level degrees that we talked about, and we've got an intern program. So that's one way that we try to recruit. The other is that we try to be very active in forums like this one, where we can talk about the work that we do and hopefully attract good talent. And the other thing we've done is partnership. So we have partnered with the statistics group at WashU and with other groups. We've even done a partnership with Express Scripts, right? And so when we feel like there's a skill that we're lacking, we try to find somebody who has that skill and partner with them to do the work. So those are sort of the 3 areas we're trying to tackle the problem. It is getting harder to find people.
I'm going to steal Laura's staff. So, we hire statisticians. Where do I find them? Are there any statisticians in the room? Are you? Talk to me.
Card-carrying statisticians. We're looking for people who know. We were up at the big annual statistics conference in Chicago 3 weeks ago. I know it sounds like fun. Interviewed half a dozen PhDs, and we have one coming, most likely from that. We want to scale biorankings up so that we become the company these people want to come to, because we're doing very advanced, innovative stuff, open source papers, publications. So we want to become the McKinsey of statistics, basically, so that we don't have to worry about recruiting. We want them to come to us.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask a final question. I have others as backup, but I'm going to ask a final question and then open it up for question and answers. And if you guys don't come up with any, I actually do have a few more, but I think there's questions that the audience has. And the last one really is to talk about diversity in your workplace. And it's important to me as a woman to be in a field that has some gender diversity. I've noticed just for myself, it's also just nice because you talk about people coming at data differently and really diving into it. And I found that it's nice to have people with different perspectives coming at that, but I'd like to hear your perspectives on that. And are you doing anything at your company with that? And diversity is in a broad sense, so define it however you want.
So we have no formal diversity program, although I was looking at the 2017 goals for the company, and one of the things on the goals is diversity, not just training, because we have diversity training, but talking about making sure that we diversify the workforce. So nothing formal right now, and I mean, I like to say that we have a pretty diverse group, which is, I think, is very helpful.
This is a hard question to answer. There's 6 of us, 4 of us are women. Is that diverse? 2 of us are men, obviously. There's a new person a year in, young African-American woman from North St. Louis, who got a free ride to WashU undergraduate. She would not mind me telling this. And so we're supporting her and paying for her master's degree. Is that diversity? I don't know what that means because we're a small company. What I'm looking at is to get the best people, whoever they are, and make sure they want to stay with us. We're putting whatever we can out there. We've got all the benefits. We're starting a 401k. We're paying for college. So whoever has the skills, we will train up to the level that they can go to. I don't know if that's diversity or not.
However you
What I
define
want to ask
it.
is, if you found that every single person in your company fit a certain racial gender mode, would you try to change it to recognize that other people might offer a perspective, right?
No.
Can you repeat the question into the microphone?
Laura, you're taking time away from these.
What I asked him was, if he found that every single person he ended up hiring all fit the same racial gender modes, would he purposely try to find another person that would fit a different gender racial mode?
No. Laura reminded me that when we first met 20 years ago, she's got all of the BJC data. I come in, I said, I want some data. She said, what data? I said, all of it.
Yeah, you said, just give me all of it.
I'll
Give
figure
me
out.
all of it.
And she said, well, do you want age? I said, that's part of all the data. We spent 20 minutes. Do you want gender? That's part of all the data. No, I don't. I want the best people. Do we have balance? I don't know. What do people think? Do we have to balance race, gender?
I think that's at the core of the diversity question, right? Is everybody wants the best people, but should you also make sure that you're diversifying? Because,
Who judges who are the best people?
I do.
You feel like,
It's my business. I decide. I don't have any problem with it.
you believe there are genuinely objective observers, or do you feel like people tend to favor people that are like them unconsciously?
I think that's right.
Well, I don't know. I have always had a quote diverse lab. Now I have a diverse company. I don't understand what this means. I want the best people.
I think Jeremy, let's.
So it's one of our strategic objectives for diversity and inclusion. We as a organization, have dedicated workforce to making sure that every new hire, we have a dedicated team trying to source different channels to find diversity. So I think from our perspective, we do look for it. I think that some of the maybe bias that we don't realize at times or people think's there. Our organization has taken it to a point where they're trying to remove some of that in that recruitment process. We don't know names of people we're bringing in because you can most people probably read Freakonomics by now, and you know what they've done with names and the bias around that. So there are a lot of things that we're doing to drive that way. In our team specifically, we have, we have diversity across the board, whether it be age, whether it be race, whether it be gender, educational backgrounds, life experiences. I mean, we feel that we're very diverse, but I think that's even only part of it. We can go out and get all that. I think one of the challenges is how do you bring out the diversity in each individual? How do you, as one of my people say, how do you not lose their diversity and enculturate them in your existing culture? So I think that's one of the things that we've got to figure out. How do we capitalize on diversity, but also how do we get the organizations to accept some of that a little bit more, and then have it adhere to some of the cultural norms that we have. So we put a lot of effort in making sure that we have that, because we do believe that there's different thoughts.
So we're a small company growing up. Of course, you have to understand that it is an India operation, so everybody's Indian. So within the US, we don't have a farm. On one hand, I think earlier we discussed that it's difficult to find people. So at the moment, we don't have a farm or diversity statement.
Okay. So,
What are your thoughts? How do we solve this issue?
So I go back to how they recruited people in World War II in England for the code breakers. And they actually had a ton of women that were code breakers, and they did that because they actually put puzzles into the newspapers, and they wanted to find people who could solve them and solve them quickly. And I think that if we look at that mindset, then I think you will get a diversity. I don't think that thinking analytically has to do with gender or race or anything, but training people up in that, I think, does take effort. I mean, as you know, I oversee a team of 24, very diverse group, and I like that because there's different perspectives, and then you have people coming from different life experiences that can challenge the data that same way. I don't want to talk about all of that at work. I want them to focus on their work. I just think it adds to that. So, I mean, it's similar to, I don't necessarily go out and look for it. I look for the mindset. So.
It's a tough issue.
Yeah.
It's a tough issue. And does racial or gender diversity give you a different perspective of the data? And do you want a different perspective of the data? The problem is a mixed model for the FDA. There's not a perspective for data. There's one right answer here. I want the best person who can do that one right answer for that problem. Brain image data is not a diversity. It's not a perspective.
It's not brain science?
It's not brain science. So, I don't know if it applies. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I figured I'd ask, and we talked a lot about who we want, what do you want to do, how do you want to grow, and that's an aspect. So it sounds like that's still a challenge in our society that some places are heading on directly, and others, you look more at the work. So just to summarize.
So one last thing. My partner and I are visiting the Little Bit Foundation, which is a foundation to put money into St. Louis City schools and give kids who don't have shoes and school supplies. We're more interested not in who we hire, but how we can use BioRankings and the profits in the future to train people across the board, and especially in North St. Louis. That's desperately needed. So that's where I think diversity comes in. Not saying do we have the balance hire, the hires balanced, but have we offered the training to the people to build that.
Fair enough. So with that, like I said, I have a few other questions, but I'd like to open it up to the audience. We've tried, this here is from a business perspective. We are going to have data scientists in the October one. So we have a question here. Daniel.
So, who have you teamed with to sell an unpopular finding?
What's the question?
Yeah.
Who have you teamed with in your organizations to sell an unpopular finding of the data?
Rule number one is we are responsible for doing the best analysis. We are not responsible for the results of that analysis. And if a client gives any of my staff a hard time because they don't like the results, I get called in. So I protect them. They all do it. They're all comfortable giving bad results to clients.
I mean, yeah, if we're giving a result that's not expected, or, that's generally where our leadership steps in and tries to help with that. The hope is that we try to shelter our analysts from that as much as possible, because I agree completely. Their job is to do the analysis. As long as we set the business problem up right, as long as they've done their job, they've gotten the right data, we understand the business problem, that they've done their job. We got to understand, did we get the wrong business requirements? Did we not address their core problem? Did their business problem, did they not understand their business problem? So I think that's where we try to go through the leadership channels to make sure that we're working with the right project stakeholders.
I think similarly, I don't know that I partner with a particular individual so much as we tend to then spend a lot of time digging into the data and the processes behind what is producing that data to make sure that the analysis we've done is actually telling the right story, as opposed to picking a partner, right? So honestly, when we get unfavorable results, it means you're going to spend a lot of time making sure that you're right.
If we can take another question. Okay.
So getting back to the diversity questions, have you ever in your experience been asked to do data science or solve a problem with data that has to do with diversity? We often hear about you're putting it on a list of goals, but have you ever turned it and had to look at diversity through a data lens?
No.
I mean, the closest we've come to that is in healthcare. We're always looking at, whether income affects your health, those sorts of things. So we do a lot of that sort of analysis all the time, but nothing more related to what we're talking about, hiring practices and even decision-making patterns in companies, nothing like that.
I was wondering if you have any recommendations for people who want to apply to your company. Should they do it online? Should they attend conferences? How do you typically
Are you a
recruit
statistician?
people? I'm a physicist.
Yeah.
Theoretical physics, statistical physics.
You talk to me, okay.
I don't know, maybe I would say all of the above. If you see something online, definitely apply for it, but it also makes sense to try to find somebody within the company that that can try to be an advocate on the inside for you. And, some of the weeds that you had to go through don't always work the way that they should in terms of identifying candidates that people should look at. Sometimes people get weeded out that shouldn't. So it helps to have more than one approach to getting in.
Being a physicist is okay because we have a PhD in quantum physicist who is one of the scientists. So don't be discouraged by that.
The only other thing I'll throw out, Federal Reserve actually has career fairs. They hold quite often now, and so there's one next week, for example. And I know the data science and data analyst, a lot of different disciplines around analytics in general. There are many of our different areas that are looking for those types of backgrounds. So I would encourage you to go on the website and looking for where you can find those career fairs as well. And then, of course, you'll see all the jobs out on the website and you can apply.
Are people having trouble finding jobs in data science here? Yeah? Who is? Not a lot, a few people, okay.
And I'd like to say that this did come up at the leadership of the meetup, so we're gonna try to work on how do we facilitate that among our members on people who are looking for jobs versus, people who have jobs and try to help with the networking. We're not sure how that approach is gonna happen just yet, but that has come up. Just because what was said was a connection helps a lot. And I think through this group, we're gonna try to help with those connections.
Okay, so I guess kind of changing gears, I think one of you guys mentioned that like when you're going through data, you have to check for errors and things like that. So I've done some work just in like manipulating data, entering data, things like that. And there are definitely errors. Do you guys have you encountered anything when you're looking at data to make sure that those errors don't have an adverse effect?
Absolutely. There is always noise, always. And you have, anything you do, the first thing and an obvious thing is you have to filter. You have to take out noise. I mean, you could have the other day we saw a transaction worth $2.4 million, and then, it could, typical store transaction. So yes, there has to be always a plan to filter out the noise.
Yeah, we often like to try to work with those who are providing us the data just to give them data quality reports back. So if we are getting data from them and are expecting a certain level of quality, especially if it's a purchase data set, for example, we usually have kind of standard set and contractual kind of agreements. But even data that's in-house, if we notice the data isn't exactly what we expect, it's missing fields, we try to work with those separate entities to see what they can do, because it's in their best interest to be providing us the best data so we can perform our services. So again, it gets back to we're providing insights, we're providing information back, and we just hope that they will help clean the data. Otherwise, we tell them this data we can't work with because it's missing X, Y, or Z in the data set.
So in my role that I switched into over the last 2 years in data governance, that's a huge piece of what we're doing. So I mean, if you broke it into 3 pieces, one piece is that we're creating accountability in the organization for data, and another piece of that is we're creating common nomenclature, so people call things the same things and know where to go get them. And that last piece is the quality piece. So we're trying to find ways that we can measure the quality, and I can't remember how many dimensions there are in our quality models, 7 or something like that. But anyway, you're measuring all the dimensions of quality and trying to give regular reports to the people who have accountability, and then driving that back into the process that created that quality problem and trying to get it fixed. So we spend an enormous amount of time on trying to make sure that our data is of high quality.
So I think this comes with experience. Look at the data. Someone gives you an Excel file, open the Excel file. Don't just read it into R or SAS. Don't just do the analysis. Scroll megabytes by, and it's the experience. So there was a consult I had at WashU in my team, and the investigator came in and said, "I'd really like this paper published in 2 months because we have a grant going now." And we had an hour meeting and we talked about it. I said, it's not going to happen because your data is at this point. You're going to do this, this, and this, and we're going to discover these types of errors, and you're going to take a month to fix that, and then we're going to discover these types of errors. And I pretty much laid it out exactly as it happened. And that's from experience. So yes, you have to look at data.
One last thing I want to add to that is, at least the way we deal with it, when you're dealing with historical data, you cannot go to the history and correct it. So you have to deal with it. It's not a waste. If somebody makes an extraction error, then you can work with it. But if the system, because of whatever reason, produces an outlier, what can you do? That's how it is. So you have to figure out how to deal with it.
So thank you for speaking with us today. I'll make my question very personal. Is the mic? Oh, okay. So I have my MPH in epidemiology and biostatistics, and currently doing my PhD in health outcomes research, trying to gather the data science toolkit under my belt. In the future, as a new grad, do you recommend that I would apply to a position in one of your companies, or should I go ahead and get my experience, my 1 or 2 year experience, as you said, Jeremy, before applying, or should I expect that you will train me to become, I mean, because I will be trained in what I've learned in school, but I'll still be fairly new.
I think it depends on the company. I mean, I think some companies are looking for people straight out of school and who want to invest in individuals, give them the training on the job, have the flexibility within their workforce to provide that training on the job. I think there are other jobs that you have to have some of that experience behind. I think it's a mixed bag. I think on our side, we're all across the spectrum, from new hires to I think it's finding where you would fit best. I mean, there's a lot of organizations around that, specialize and need your kind of specialty in doing that. It depends on what their culture is. Some probably do want the 3, 4, 5 years of experience, period. We just try a different approach in our current organization because we're trying to build a staff, and we want that staff to come with us. We want to invest in them, and we believe that similar to learning your data, learning our environment, learning our processes, learning our culture, the entire spectrum, it takes a while to come up to speed. So we want to invest, and hopefully the people invest back with us. So I don't know. I think it just depends on the organization.
I mean, I would agree. We have entry-level positions in many of the different disciplines, and so yes, we would love to have you apply.
I agree. How many statisticians have ever worked with brain imaging data? Not a lot. So we're not going to wait for the one right person. Find the place that fits you, and then we're going to teach you.
Can I say something? The way I look at it is you have to look at the stage of the company. So if you think about if it's a startup, they are looking for, their survival is very important for them. So they are looking for people. At the end of the day, you need to pay back, right? They are venture capitalists, you have to pay back the money. So they'll probably look for, if I define the culture of the organization there would be very aggressive, and they're probably looking for experienced people. So you have to look at what stage of the company that you are applying for is in, and that sort of defines. I'm sure there are companies that are probably, they already have a model, and then you gain experience with it. So.
Thank you.
So this field is very, diverse, right? And traditionally, the people working in this field do not document what they do, like the programmers or the statisticians. So I'm curious, from the Fed's view and from BJC's view, what are you guys doing in the area of data governance to make sure that the models that you do today, those experiments and information is captured, and you don't repeat those same models or same experiments 3 years from now?
So we have a very involved data governance process that looks beyond just some basic things. It's looking at how we use the data. It's looking at, can we legally use the data? Can we use the data with the intended purpose that we're trying to use it for? So our data governance goes from where we source the data, what we can do with that data, who we can disclose that data to, so that the entire spectrum. And then from actual model management, source repository, I'll say we have a very collaborative team that we have information sharing sessions too, that we try to share some of the findings, some of the pitfalls. There is a level of documentation that we require. There's working files. There's not always a standard template or format we follow in each and every case. There are ways that we look at putting a model into production and determining what a champion model is and how we manage that process. And so there are some pretty strict governance processes around that. So we do, it's an evolving space. I think this is something that's affecting everybody right now, and I'm gonna hand over to the governance expert here. But for us, we are still in that journey of trying to understand the entire spectrum from the point of getting the data to archiving a project and decommissioning it and starting on the next model. There's still a lot of work there, but we do ensure though that we are getting the right checks in place and that people are sharing what we can and we are learning. We do lesson learned documentation.
I wish we were like Jeremy. So I think, our data governance program is still pretty new, and as you probably have guessed, I'm leading it and I'm more of a data geek, right? So we're starting in the data space, nomenclature, lineage, quality, that sort of stuff. And we do have analytic teams. There's no central analytics at BJC. There are many analytic teams. And the amount of sharing between them is it's
Minimal.
It's not what it could be. And it is hard to document this stuff, and I don't think that we have well-rounded practices for that yet. You know, which isn't to say that people aren't trying to be diligent and doing good work, but I think we still have a long way to come in terms of doing what you're suggesting.
But I want to address this.
In biorankings, we use SWeave and R, if you're familiar with that. And SWeave is a way of doing reproducibility. So whenever we send a report to a client, they also get the RNW file that generated the report. We're open source, we show them the code. So we document every step. We don't have the problem of governance of data that comes to us. It comes from a client. It's put on our server and frozen. We can only read from it. So we're assuming they've taken care of that. But reproducibility of the statistical analysis is a huge problem.
Hi, well, as was discussed, actually, sometimes the clients are looking for certain kind of results. And, you know, like, if the data doesn't satisfy that kind of results, you know, they're not happy. But I have read some papers, you know, where a company in-house, you know, like, they are looking for certain kind of results. And if the data is not producing those kind of results, the data is tweaked or, you know, kind of a little bit modified to actually come up with that kind of results, which is actually not a very ethical thing to do. So I mean, how is that, you know, like solved? How is this problem solved and the accountability factor?
Quit working for that company and work for an ethical company. If people are going to lie with the data, don't be involved with it.
It's that simple. Otherwise, you're unethical.
Yeah, I think it comes to the integrity of the company. I mean, that's one of the foundations of the Federal Reserve is, you know, trust in what we do. And so that would not be tolerated behavior. You would never get that kind of ask. And so that's just not something I would agree. I wouldn't want to be there.
The only comment I have is I wouldn't call it tweaking the data, but at the end of the day, you can, I mean, if this is an accepted thing, if you give the same data to 100 people, they'll come up with 100 different stories. So what it means is you can make the data tell the story you want to tell. But I don't necessarily say that you're tweaking with the data. I'm just a different point of view.
You said earlier there's always been this right answer. I heard a couple of you people say that there's a right answer in all this, but then he just contradicted that.
One of us is wrong.
Well, is that in the interpretation then?
The story.
The story. So the story is the difference. I mean, but if you're trying to have something reproducible, you should have 100 people be able to reproduce the same result, correct?
I think what Bill had mentioned was the definition of something, right? You know, how he used it, which is, I think that's different. That what I'm saying is the story or the conclusion you draw could be, I mean, like I said, it's a normal thing if you Google it. If the same data set, if it's like watching a movie. Different people watch a movie and a documentary, they'll come up with some kind of different derivations of the same data set.
Do we have time?
Yeah, we have time.
You look like you're getting ready to end this.
Well, I am, but we're going to finish this. This is lively.
I just have about 20 minutes.
I can turn off the clock.
So there are. It's happened before, I can speak. There are different parts of statistics, and you got to it before. There's exploratory, where you want to try different things to find patterns. We have that problem today. A client wanted cluster analysis of liver data, and Shireen and I went through about 5 different approaches and came up with one. Now, if we had done other approaches, we may have come up with different patterns. But we're putting that in an SWeave file so that we're completely open about what we did. But someone could have come in and said, you should have done a Bayesian analysis, you should have done this analysis or that analysis. Other times there are certain things in statistics that are just wrong. If you have live-die data, you don't do a t-test. And if people try to do things like that, then there are just blatantly wrong things. But document what you do. Now I'll be quiet.
Well, I think that one of my favorite quotes is from Andre Dunkels, who says it's very hard, it's very easy to lie with statistics. It's very hard to tell the truth without them. So it speaks to that a little bit. So with that lively discussion, I think you guys are going to be here for a little bit and people can talk, maybe ask you a few questions. I really want to thank them again for being on the panel. If we can. Thank you all for coming. I do want to give a shout out to a few other of the meetups in the area. If you really want to learn a program, if you're into Python or R, there are meetups for that. You actually get into coding and you may see people standing up and coding instead of talking about things. Our normal talks outside, well, our normal talks, we have other presentations where people dive into, say, a machine learning topic, and then we'll give an applied talk about it. We try to do a couple of trainings around the year, so just look at what we have and see what you're interested in coming. And again, we have 2 more parts to this panel that will happen throughout the year. So come back, ask questions, let's figure out how to network together as well, and really happy to see all the new people here, so thank you.